Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. We've just had a slight issue. Bear with me for 1 second. Trying to fix that. Let me try and get rid of it. Bear with me 1 second. Just having a few problems over on the Diggers and Dozers page. We should be able to resolve that fairly easily, I think. Yeah, looks like we have. So we're live. We're live. Good evening. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Very, very quickly, I was at the Institute of Demolition Engineers spring seminar up at the Royal Armouries a few weeks back. Lots and lots of very good presentations, all orchestrated by the new president, Adrian McLean, who hopefully will be in the wings tonight. But the one that stood out the most is unquestionably the one that we're about to show you tonight. Mark Mates of HiTec Demolition gave an absolutely moving presentation. Brought him and a few others to tears, actually. So I'm hoping we won't set him off again this evening. But that's more or less the thing that we're talking about. Both of the guys that are presenting tonight, both Mark and Mike Kehoe, who is a familiar face around these parts, are in the green room. But to get things rolling, I want to show you precisely the thing that we're talking about. And it looks like this.
7 years after the disaster at Grenfell Tower.
Dagenham in East London. Smouldering smoke, hundreds of firefighters, 40 fire engines.
Unsafe cladding.
Fire safety laws have been broken.
It's now just a charred shell.
Full evacuation.
They left everything behind. And her wedding dress. No fire alarm.
Governments who've cut regulation.
Angela Rayner
pushed the health and safety executive and those responsible who own the building.
Too many unsafe buildings.
And into all of that, with just a few hours' notice, Mark Mates, who is down the bottom there, and Mike Kehoe, who is that way, they were thrust into that. Good evening, chaps.
Good evening.
We've got a presentation to go through, but just before we actually press the button on that, how long did you have to get yourselves ready to go and start work supporting that?
Not very long. It was we got asked to have a look at the project, and within, I'd say, well, within hours, we was discussing it, and then it was a few days then to get the machines and get things moving. Obviously, more paperwork side of it. There was a lot more involved with the back side of it, with regards to getting paperwork, RAMs, method statement. Obviously, there was two sides to this job. You had the kind of the political side with all your paperwork issues, HSE, Environment Agency, council, and then you had the site side. So getting all the machines sorted, the men sorted, the actual site set up. And this is obviously the reason why we brought Mike in, because there was that many people. Honestly, there was that many people involved in just the backside of it, not the site. The site was, for us, this and most demolition companies, the site's the easy part. Your site set up, your machines, that's what you set up for.
And given that the fire that had taken place, I mean, were you called in with the plan of just demolishing the building, or to make it safe, or combination thereof?
No, so there was we got called in by insurers, which we usually do, more to look at there was a bit of confusion on this job. So there was another contractor on there. We got appointed after they left the job to look at the methods of the job. There was a lot of inclement weather. We was coming to winter. So we looked at using high reach excavator to take the two top floors off. So the initial job were just two top floors. So two top floors are made of timber construction, and then the bottom 4 floors under that was concrete and steel. So we was looking at just the two top floors because that was the emergency side of it.
Okay. I'll tell you what, very, very quickly, I'm just going to have a quick rattle through the chat just to make sure everybody knows who everyone is. Gary Muirhead was the first off the mark, as he so often is. He says he wouldn't miss it. Steve Williamson, who is still working, but he is here. A certain Mr. McLean is watching as well. Evening, gents, he says. And speaking of Mr. McLean, there is another event, not exactly the same as this, but there's another event tomorrow for the IDE themselves. If you look in the chat, you'll be able to see I've posted a link to that. It's on Inner City Demolition. It's actually a project that Mike Kehoe was involved in, but I think somebody from John F. Hunt is doing that. And Gary Muirhead has just said, is Paul Ford, the author of Dangerous Structures book, is he still involved in this kind of stuff? As far as I know, he most certainly is. Yes, right. Let us. I tell you what I want to do. I'm going to put the presentation up on the screen, and I'm going to take myself out of the way. And I don't know who is going to start, who's going to fill in, but I'll take myself out of the way. And guys, you just tell me when you want the next slide up, and I'll leave you to it.
If you want me to go through it. So on the bottom left-hand side, that was your project. It was like a 7-story building. 2 top floors were timber construction, was built on top of the original concrete frame structure. And that was the initial part of the job. Obviously, the top right-hand picture was the building being building engulfed in flames with the fire brigade trying to put it out. Go on to the next frame, Mark.
Yeah, we've seen that video.
Yeah, on to the next one. Yeah, so this was just detailing out what the actual building constructed of. It was undergoing refurb before, obviously, the fire. It was having all the cladding replaced. They were more or less finished. I think they had, I think it was 6 weeks or round about that to go, undertaking the cladding works. On to the next slide, Mark. Yeah, the fire broke out, and it was quite devastating. The front of the building, and I said this in the presentation, the front of the building, people couldn't understand from the front what was up with the building, but from the front, they were literally, you had all the windows which were smoke damage, but it was blocked off by the scaffold. So the front scaffold looked relatively intact. There was no signs of any fire. It wasn't until you can get behind it, and obviously you can't get behind. It was where the building stood. It was on a main road on the front, but the back of it was a business. So the back of it, obviously, this was a picture of it. And when we showed the people the pictures, and it was the same with the residents. The residents literally came out the building, didn't look at the building, and went straight to a council community centre. And then they couldn't understand why they weren't allowed in. They wanted to get in. And they wanted to get back into their flats. It wasn't until we actually shown them the pictures in the meeting that we had with them that it wasn't possible. It was just too unsafe. Would you go on to the next slide, Mark?
I mean, obviously, when you arrived on site, it would have been what, 5.5 years after Grenfell to see that must have stopped you in your tracks, surely.
And I think, Mark, sorry, one of the key issues is that the new government had become incumbent into the political spectrum. It not long after, Grenfell was still in everyone's minds, and it was a cladding. The cladding on the outside caught fire. Now, no one knows if that was the cause of the fire, but it was right in the forefront of everyone's political mindset. And 2 days later, when we're on site, there's MPs, there's the Deputy Prime Minister. There's very, very senior people from the HSC, local authorities, councillors, MPs, all interested in this little bit of fire that's gone on, which from the front doesn't look too bad until you go around the back end and you can see it. And then one of the problems Mark talks about there is the fact that, to let people back into site, it was the structural elements of the building. Now, Mark will tell you, we had a terrible problem with the fire brigade, and they seemed to be very, very keen to get back into some of the floors, which we said at the time, we felt some of the floors had started to fail and collapse. And we didn't really understand the structural elements of the building because we hadn't been able to do a structural survey, only the drone surveys that we put in place. So we really didn't know what the structure of the building was. The fire brigade's going back in. The local residents want to know why they can't get back in. It was a really tough time that first few days while we had that one. We had the HSC on site all the time. And obviously we had political, not saying interference, but sort of political interest throughout the project.
I'm going to throw over to the chat very quickly. Gary Muirhead said, did we ever find out how the fire started? I mean, by the sound of it, it was the cladding that helped it spread, but was there any cause ever identified on it?
Well, it actually started from what I believe there was inertia at the bottom floor. So from what I've been told, we don't tend to see this side of it, how it happens, because the insurers appoint forensic investigators. You've got the insurers, you've got the HSC, and you've got like fire investigators, all appoint independent people to investigate this type of thing. Now, it was said that it was started this is due to the CCTV that they got in the kids' nursery downstairs. Now, we don't know what it was, whether it's electrical fire that started or whether it was their Kosh store. They had a Kosh store downstairs, whether it was something from there. But we've still not to this day been told what it was that started it. But there was no, when obviously the police was involved, they said there was no criminal offence committed.
What I'd say, Mark, is that when you said about the cladding, exacerbated the fire. What the cladding was, this was cladding post Grenfell. So this was a reclad on top of the building. So although it was a very large construction of putting the cladding on, this was a post Grenfell effect to clad this building. It wasn't the sort of old legacy and non-fire retardant one. This was like modern, up to date cladding they put on, and it was literally, as Mark said, they were about ready to take the scaffolding down. They were 6 weeks from completing. The company had done it. It was about 6 weeks to completing the whole one. And then obviously everyone assumed it was the cladding, where in reality it wasn't the cladding.
The scaffold actually helps the fire spread. It was the scaffold boards. Obviously, when you've got scaffold boards, the very dry timber, and when it's spread, it's just spread around the building and engulfed it, and it's just really helped the fire spread. And then it's gone to the top floor. The top 2 floors are timber as well, and then that's just took a light. So all these factors involved in that has just helped the fire spread.
Okay, I'm going to say a very quick one from Dan Cullen, who has just said, good evening to the car park master. That must be you, Mike. I'm going to take myself back off the screen again, and I'm going to put the presentation back up again. How do I do that? I know. I'll take that one away, and there we are.
And I think one of the pictures at the bottom, when Mark asked us to come in and help them, was the problem is the seat of the fire was down below, and then it spread upwards, and then all of the top 2 floors went on fire. So the middle section of that structure, of the concrete frame, had started to fail in the middle, and that's why we were concerned about what would happen with the building itself. So at that point, we needed to do some structural assessments very early on in that location, not only on the roof, but through the middle of the building.
So yeah, this is obviously one of the reasons why we appointed Mike. We was dealing with a lot of different people. I was in meetings daily with residents, with council, fire, police, HSE, insurers, and there was a lot of people involved with fire brigade as well. They don't really see this side of it. They see a fire and they enter a building. They don't see that we've took over a job, we're principal contractor, and it falls back to us. They don't understand that side of it. So we have to remind them, listen, let's step back a little bit. Let's instruct a structural engineer, and that's why we got Andon's structural engineers in, to first of all, let's have a look. Can we get someone in there? Can we get in the stair courts? Can we get is there anywhere we can go? And obviously we had numerous drones in there. We had numerous ideas of how can we get an aerial platform there. So we got an aerial platform to have a look up there. There was probably a week where we stepped back, where there was no progress, and that really stressed a lot of the tenants out, because the tenants wanted to get back in, they wanted to get the equipment, but we had to have these meetings and say, listen, this is what we're trying to do to try and save the building, rather than just go in there, knock it all down and put everything in the pile. you know, we are actually trying. Sometimes you need to step back to reassess what's in there, to try and preserve as much as you can. It's not all about knocking it down. It's try and preserve the actual building, because obviously there's an investigation as well. The more you preserve, the better the investigation will be into the building to try and claim back, whether it's an insurance claim or whether it's a third party claim. Is there someone negligent? You know, there's all these factors involved.
Well, I think Gary makes a good point. If you maybe move on to the next slide, Mark, I don't know what's on the next slide, but what we had to do, Gary, is if you can see there from the back, is we went in with the drones above, and we also took the drones inside of the building. So the drones could go in, and we had a special drone operator that went in with the blades were protected. So if it did knock it, it would fall down and it could still come back out. It wouldn't break the propellers on there from in there. Went in, done a floor by floor, but went in on it all the way through. Mark says the mute was great for us, and the fire out, which they call it, to get to the location. We went up in that. But as you can see there, we can see the top floor is all timber, and it was without the drones, it would have been virtually impossible to have got the level of access and the structural, the awareness, so Andams could go and do some calculations and do some drawings for us to be able to give us some comfort what was in there. And I think what Andams come up with is that the building wasn't in an imminent prospect of failure, but would fail at some point soon. So it was going to fail. It was just when it would fail. So that was what the conclusion they took in there. But in the short term, they were happy that the building would stand, but over a period of time left, it would fail.
And the other thing we had to deal with is obviously the first phase. So it's split into phases. The initial phase was to get the two top floors off and to clear the top timber frame away. You had a lot of factors involved in that. You had a scaffold that wrapped around a building. So we had to liaise with a scaffold contractor. And obviously he had over £1 million worth of scaffold on this building, and he didn't want to lose any scaffold. And we don't want to just go in and chop a scaffold up. As anyone knows who chops scaffold with an eye reach, it can ping anywhere, it can go anywhere. And the last thing we want to do is cause any more damage to roads, residents. So we took the decision to bring a bigger high reach in. We brought in a 52 metre high reach that can get up and across and over. It had a camera on it as well to try and deal with the top two floors. But with this building, the way it wasn't in imminent risk of collapse. But when you've got a machine moving stuff off the top, we had to then get Andons in. Once we dealt with the top two floors, we had to get Andons in to reassess the building. You know, has there been any more movement? Has there been any more cracking? There was a lot more facts involved in not just taking two top floors off, but once we'd done that, it was then looking again at another building. You know, what was the change in the building? You know, the machine could have, not saying heavy-handed because we had a good operator, but you know, it could have pierced the top floor, or the steel on the top floor could have done some damage, or the fire could have caused some deterioration to the actual slabs because of the heat. So we had to look at all that, and that was, again, we had to get the drone operators in, have a look at that. You know, it was a real investigation in, and when you've got daily and hourly meetings with, you know, police, fire, and it wasn't just, you know, the fire brigade locally. It was literally your chiefs, your superintendents, your HSE officers, all want to know what's going on, how it's going. For me, they were the easy part. It was the actual tenants. You've got 60 different flats in there, and straight away we had to deal with the top two floors. So each floor, you had 10 flats in. So you've got straight away, you've got 20 flats to deal with on your top two floors. There was a lot. They was more or less gone. But what we said we'll do, and this is the way we did a method of doing it in a sequence where we brought down what we could onto the floor in a bit of an area, lay down area. We then had our operatives sift through what we can, get pictures, passports, you know, what we could get for the tenants. You know, last thing you want to say to someone is you can't get anything back when you need to try. So we try what we can. We put extra labour on there. We had a machine down the bottom, moving your bigger items to try and get what we can. And we liaise with the tenants daily. We set up a WhatsApp group with them so we can communicate. And each day we had a liaison officer on site who messaged, say, today we're going to deal with flats 601, 602 and 603. So then we had that discussion with them, and then we brought them down to site, and some of them watched it. You know, some people want to get that closure. They want to see how their flats, what state their flats in. So we got the drone again, had a look, took some pictures. You know, we got a list of each individual flat. What is it that's in that special to you, that you want, that you need? You know, a lot of them was going away. A lot of them had jewelry, that the family heirlooms that they left. You know, we tried to get every single bit of what they wanted back, and I think we achieved, I'd say, 90% of it.
I think if you look at those photographs, Mark, that you can go back up onto the screen. I think what we fairly realised fairly early on, the demolition people watching this, is that photograph to the right hand side is that middle section there is going to be sacrificial scaffolding. That's going to come down and that's going to be lost. What we did around the other side of it is that we assessed the scaffolding. We got structural engineers onto the scaffolding. We got the scaffolding contractor with their structural engineers, and we decided that we could actually take 3 sides of the scaffolding away, and we could cut a chasing to leave that section in place. And what we were seeing here is that the steelwork that went either side of the timber roof was fully integrated from one side to the other. So the only way we were going to get the top building down was to take the scaffolding down to the level of the concrete area. So we managed to take top 2 floors, or with Mark and the scaffolding, we managed to take the top 2 floors of the scaffolding down, and then we could then take that away and then pull the building and the materials away from the front of the road into the back of the courtyard area, which we can see on the left hand side. And that's what we went for, to get that back from in there. So we then looked to see, we've taken the top 2 floors, taken the timber away, and now we've got 5 floors of concrete and steel frame building, which we can then reassess. So maybe if you have a look at the next one, possibly, Mark, I think so again, from the front, Mark made, as you can see, that's what it looks like from the front. It looks unharmed and untouched, and people were seeing that at the front and thinking, actually, there's not such a bad fire, why can't we get back in? But if you go back to the previous photograph, you can see the difference from the front, that's the back, and then if you go on the next photograph again, the bit on the right hand side is the front bit. So it looks like, why can't we get back in, or why can't we get back in from in there? And then we were then hit with, as Mark says, the challenges of government, stakeholders, 60 residents, none of them insured, all of them sort of lower socio-economical value from the property, all rented, not a hugely rich area. So again, struggling a bit. None of the, as we found out later, none of the properties insured, no contents insurance. Difference between some a resident said to us was, do we insure the contents of the flat, or do we kid seat? And that's the sort of stuff that we were getting on a daily basis. All the properties internally damaged beyond belief. We have to talk about later. There was suspected firearms in there, and there was ammunition that was found at a later point. And the bottom bit there is we just didn't know what the structural makeup was, and we didn't know how. And then obviously how the structure had reacted under fire.
Just very quickly, I just want to ask a question for my own peace of mind here. This must have been a bit like a balancing act. Obviously, the residents want to get back as what they can as quickly as they can. you know, you probably got pressure from local MPs and stakeholders to get the thing resolved. But you as a professional demolition outfit, you know, it must be, well, hang on a minute, hang on, let's do this thing meticulously and make sure it's all okay. It's a balancing act, isn't it?
Which is when we got brought in, you know, when you look at a job, you know, yeah, we can do that, we can do this, but it's what comes with that job, you know. As for me, it's my job was to deal with the politics side of it. Now that for me is just, it takes up say 90% of your time just dealing with like your council, you've got people who don't understand demolition, and you talk to them, and this is where it struck me. I'm sat in a meeting with 60 different residents, property owners, the council, fire brigade, police, and I'm talking about the way we're going to do a project and the way we go about this. And it was 10 minutes in, and everyone looked really confused, like what's going on. So I had to kind of step back and really go into layman's terms of, you know, explain to them the way we're going to do the job. You know, when we talk about selector grabs, high reaches, excavators, you know, people don't day-to-day life don't understand this. So we had to really go back and really strip it bare and explain to them. We did some drawings. We had drawings done which explained it in a bit more detail to them. Videos showing them pictures of high reaches. Some of them came down to site because we had liaisons. So the tenant liaisons, they come down to site and took some pictures of the excavator, spoke to the people on site, and they understood the methods then. Sometimes, like I said before, you have to step right back and go forward a bit more. It looks very intrusive just to go in, smash someone's house down and come away. Whereas if you explain the method in a bit more detail to make them understand, listen, we're not going in there just to smash it in. We're going in there to try and get what we can for you. You know, the building around it we can deal with, but it's whatever's in there that it's not my property, it's yours. And that's what we explained to them. And even the council, they didn't understand. They wanted the road opening. They wanted the footpath opening as soon as possible.
And I think one of the things Mark touches on is what people didn't understand as well as CDM. So, you know, we've now got this fire damage property. We've got to, you know, comply with CDM. We've now got to put principal contractor, and we took on the role as principal designer. We're now trying to collate all the information that we've got in there. Normally, if on a fire damage job, we are under a Section 78 demolition notice, which means that all the services are disconnected. Actually, on this one, strangely, it didn't, because the building owner had got a contractor in early doors, so that they deemed that wasn't necessary. So then we had to put all the planning together, and then one of the hardest things that we had to do was keep people out of the building, such as the fire brigade, the police, the investigations, the insurance, because at the end of the day, Mark and HiTec were PC, so they had control of the site. So all the crossovers between the investigation, PC, PD, people wanting to get back in, all of a sudden started to think is where we had to start making and be quite forceful for people and say, actually, you can't go back in on site. It's unsafe. You can't go in. And we had one day with the fire brigade where, I'm not saying it got, you know, me and Mark are no shrinking violets, as you know, but it got a little bit heated to say who had the responsibility to go back into that building when it was in there. So all that became quite difficult to understand the roles of whose roles it was and who was taking over. And then the council wanted to make sure that the road was open. And then the problem with where the building was situated is that it was a through road to a major estate, major industrial estate. So if they didn't go through the road, they had a 4-mile route round to the other way, which you can imagine wasn't very happy. So it was a real difficult one for us on that one. I mean, we go to the next one, Mark. I think the next slide, I think we can have a look from in there. And I suppose there's the picture on where Mark had called us in and asked us to help them out at this time, was that's the back of the building. It's still, you know, to a certain extent, even after we were on there the first few days, it was still smouldering. There was still bits going on in there. The HSE was obviously concerned about the fire restarting again back on the ground, so we had to, as Mark said, put it on the ground and resort it out. But what we did is we got Andens involved to start producing a sequence from in there, because we were under immense pressure from the HSE to produce, and not what I've come across before, almost daily correspondence with the HSE to tell them exactly what we were doing, where we were doing. They came to site, the structural engineering division, the HSE come to site, senior investigator come to site, and there was 2 other HSE officers that came, and then we had a dedicated HSE officer we had to do daily updates with from in there. So this is where we started to get into the little bit of the nitty gritty and the crux of how we're dealing with it. Mark's off dealing with, again, as he said, really difficult with the tenant liaison, whereas we sort of got into the nitty gritty of making the site safe, getting exclusion zones in place, understanding what's required, and then putting all the paperwork. And believe it or not, you know, fire damage, we've still got to comply with CDM. We've still got to make sure to do some background noise monitoring. We've got to monitor it for asbestos, which we took samples through. We had background monitors on there for asbestos all the way through. We had an old management asbestos survey, which we tried to use as best we could. And we just then at this point started to get a plan together how we was going to do it. And as you can start to see there, ourselves, Andens and Mark got together to put a plan together.
I think the hardest thing on this one that I've never seen before with the HSE is the fact that they was asking for updates, but also commenting. And I've never seen that. Normally, they only come to site when something happens, or they're doing a visit, but they never really comment on getting things to change or asking for changes. But on this, there was heavily involved. I've never seen it before. Really, I don't know whether that was because of the political side of it, from higher up, or because it was high profile. I'm not sure, but I've never seen that before when you're literally updating HC daily.
I don't think myself and Mark has ever come to a situation where the sort of the senior, I don't know, chief executive director of the HSE had direct liaison on this project. Maybe he was getting it back from powers above, but that's what was getting from us. As we're getting fed from us, is that we had to report back to the top echelons of the HSE on a daily basis of where they're going. And then eventually it went from daily to weekly as it went through. But, you know, we also found such things as, you know, live gas mains underneath, which we had to deal with and get them terminated very quickly, which the gas board was great, to be fair. We got the electricity all disconnected fairly soon afterwards from in there. And then there was a level of details on the planning and still trying to understand where we were going and to get the paperwork in place and to get a construction phase plan in place, ready for Mark's team to go, all the paperwork in place, local authority to give us information. And we've obviously got the old files that we managed to go in and off the previous contractor. And also we had to try and help the fire brigade do their investigation. So I think maybe the next one, Mark, the next one. Maybe Mark, you can talk through this one, because this was the traffic management plan, which was quite a difficult one, wasn't it? For us?
I mean, this is another thing that we had to deal with. The council, that many different people involved. One of them was the traffic. I don't even know what you call them these days. There's that many different roles for different people, and so the road was already closed in place, so we had to take over the road closure. So as soon as we took over, they said, right, because you've took over, you've took the top 2 floors off, we can open the road now. I says, no, it doesn't work like that. You know, it needs to stay shut. So we had numerous meetings, and they said, the one thing that come back was, yeah, but in London, they're not buildings down with just the footpath closed, or not even the footpath closed. And I said, one, it's not a normal building, and two, it could collapse at any time. As soon as he said that, he's like, well, is it going to collapse? I said, we don't know. You know, there was a lot of back and forward. You can't give a definitive answer if you don't know yourself, which is why I said to them, we've got structural engineers, we've got investigators in there to determine what's happening with this building, but we are not opening that road, putting people at risk or potentially put people at risk. But when you got people that don't understand that, it's very hard, and that was another task we had to deal with, and it was going on, and it's still to this day.
And I think one of the things Mark talks about is if you, that Fuller Road that you see on that drawing, on the picture and that plan, for someone to walk to the train station or to the tube station from in there, it walks straight past there. But now all of a sudden they've got a 2.5-3 mile walk around the other way. So what happened in the first few days is people was trying to jump over the horn, and people were trying to get over the barrier. So the police were there in full force. I think there was up to 8 officers when we first got there, and then we had to put on with Mark. We had 12 security officers at the start with 4 dogs to stop people going in. One, to try and go into the flats, but also to stop the shortcut going through. And then we had wagons coming through. We had to close the road off, and we were getting abuse off the wagon drivers because they couldn't get to the commercial one. The residents weren't happy to do it from in that way. But the problem is we had to keep an exclusion zone, because if that building did collapse or fall and there was traffic going underneath it and we'd opened it up, then we could have had potential accidents, injuries, or even fatalities on that road. So we had to keep that road, and we had to keep the exclusion zone shut. And there's one of the things that me and Mark was very insistent on, is that we've got to keep this exclusion zone sterile to ensure from there. So we had a series of security guards around the outside, which we'll see a little bit later on, but we kept that road closed all the way through until it was down to which we'll see a bit later on, down to 2 floors below.
It's hard to tell someone that you can't open a road when they don't understand why it can't be open, and all they come back with is, but they demolish buildings like this with the road open. And they do, of course they do, but it's not your conventional, it's not your conventional project or job. And this is what we had to keep reiterating to the people. It's not your conventional job. And these traffic council officers are looking at the front of the building as well. They weren't looking at the back of the building. They were saying, no, there's nothing wrong with it, which wasn't helping at the time. They were sending a lot of emails. At one point, they was threatening us with legal action because they wanted the road open, and we had to go to the other council officers to say, listen, can you have a word with that department to tell them we're not keeping the road closed for the sake of it. It's actually there for a reason.
Yeah,
very quickly.
I think Wayne makes a good point there. Sorry, Mark.
I just want to throw this up because I don't think he's hanging around. A guy that we all know and love dearly, Wayne Bagnall, just said, there's always lots of different agendas on emergency demolitions, and Mike is correct. CDM always applies unless there's an immediate risk to life, then you do catch up. Well done, Mark and Mike, and I have to sign off shortly. So thank you for sharing that.
So that point that I touched on before, Mark, is and Mark and Wayne's right, is CDM initially, if it was on the Section 78 emergency notice, immediately to get the paperwork in place for CDM wouldn't apply. Unfortunately, we weren't in that position. So what we've done is that the council have given us permission to demolish, because we put a retrospective Section 80 in place, which was carried out quickly. But we weren't under emergency powers because the exclusion zone had been put in place, because we controlled and sanitised the area. And I have to say the previous contractor before me come on had done that really well. So, congratulations to them. When we took this over, we were now in a situation that it wasn't under the Section 78 emergency procedure. It was under normal procedure. So we had to go through the CDM regs from in there. So we couldn't just start knocking this building down without any thought, any CDM, any plans, any method statements and risk assessments. So we had to get that package in place really pretty quick from in there. And again, as I say, Mark was taking the role of PC, we were PD, and then we were collating all the information and getting the the structural, which we brought Andems in to get the structural calculations in place, which we had to bring all together before we could get sign off. And as Mark said before, never quite had it before where we got sign off. I'm not saying HSE said, give us a tick and said, yeah, you can go, but they had no, well, how they worded it is that they worded that they have no further comments, which basically means, yeah, we think you've done everything beyond reasonable practical to get going. And once they had no further comments, we could then start work. So CDM, all the paperwork, carrying out the up to work up to BS 6187, you know, all these things we had to work in place to make sure we had the right paperwork in place, method statements, signed off with the operatives, the high reach drivers. Then we had the scaffolders working with us, structural engineers. So all that bit then had to be fed into a paperwork package so we could get sign off to start. So maybe next one, Mark, I think, maybe next one. And this is what, maybe if I'm okay to talk on this one, Mark, this is what we started to do. And then obviously Lawrence, my son, was based on there a couple of days a week. And he started to produce these plans. And what we called this then was we started to call this the master plan. And what we had to do is we had to send this to the HSC on a sort of daily basis at the start and a weekly basis. And it basically showed all the way to the top of the site, which was the exclusion zone. And you can't see it so clearly from there, but you can see each and every aspect is numbered, and including the areas that we were doing the demolition from in there. We had other buildings around it from in there. We had to do some floor loading, some floor testing, because we had effectively nearly 100-ton machine on there with the high reach. So we had to test the floors, make sure there was no basements. At the front, which we can see, we had a live gas main, which we then terminated. Then we've got to get the materials in and out. So this became our master plan, which we used from there, and the exclusion zone worked. And then we can see that we had security areas from in there where we had to deal with the security, where we were bringing the materials out. So this became the plan that we worked to. And what we were doing then, if we weren't using it, we'd delete it, we'd bring the exclusion zone in place, or we'd move to the other side from in there. We had some nukes and cherry pickers to give access, or we had video access for the machine operator from in there. So all of a sudden, and this was agreed with the HSE, they wanted to see this before we started. They wanted what they called the demolition master plan to understand that we moved forward, and then it could be amended on some cases, Mark agreed, we amended this on an hourly basis.
Yeah, there was one point where, we had to go through a lot, even to the point where we had a security van and the welfare next to, we had a separate welfare for the security at the front. So the welfare was next to the security van, and the HC wanted to know how the security guards getting from the security van into the welfare. That's how in detail they wanted it.
Yeah. I mean, it was probably of all the years, and I know I've done in it 40 odd years, that was probably one of the most detailed method plans that we did to understand the routing of not only the plant and machine, the demolition, but the security, the exclusion zone. Directly opposite, we had the builders merchants who we took half of their yard from. They reduced the car park. So all that area had to be kept in, and we had to keep the security team on 24/7. So they had to be inducted into our demolition plan, where they would be into the security. All those things had to be factored in. And then, as you can see on the right-hand side of that drawing, we had to clear about 40 or 50 items that we had to deal with on a daily basis. So, but that worked really well, and that's something me and Mark we're on another job together. We've used now quite significantly, because this master plan works quite well. It can be changed on an iPad. It can be changed very, very quickly. You can add and stuff up there, and I think for us it worked really well. Sorry, Mark. Maybe the next one. And then this is Mark. Mark deals with the residents, so I'll leave Mark with this one.
Yeah, so it was. So we had, like I said, on site, we had the site team was absolutely. You couldn't ask for a better site team on here. It was literally dealing with people stood there, and for me it was very touching, and for the lads especially as well, because they were dealing with them day in, day out. They had a WhatsApp group inviting them down, so we picked out what we could, and then we had a sterile area where we got the items, put them in a bag, and then we actually handed over the items. Now it was difficult because they wanted everything, you know, electrical items. We had to tell them that, listen, we can't hand over TVs, because if you go and plug that in your new apartment, with all the soot and the carcinogenic, you know, materials that are inside that, it could cause another fire. So we had to literally scale it back to, like, you know, personal items and documents, anything like that. And as we were doing it, they was very thankful. The lads on site was dealing with it was unbelievable. You know, I can honestly say the lads that we've got are very courteous like that, because we've done this numerous times. The way to deal with that is really good. So we had like a couple of hour window. We said, right, this flat we're going to be dealing with at 10 to 11. Even though we could have done that flat within 2 seconds with a machine as 100 ton. You know, you've got a 120 ton machine with a 12 ton grab going through it. It doesn't take long to you know, you can grab the whole of the things in, but with a driver, it literally picking it out, put it on the floor. We were sieving through what we could, any items. You know, we were getting things like rings and passports still. So it was very, very meticulous. We were going through it to get them what they could. We handed that over to each individual flat at the time, and yeah, it was very touching to see people who have got literally nothing. And when I say nothing, I literally mean nothing. They've walked out in, some of it have got slippers and dressing gowns. They've been gifted stuff from the, you know, the charity shops. And when you've got people really thankful for a passport and a picture of the child, or the picture of the mum and dad that's passed, it's very touching. It honestly is. It's one of the best, for me, jobs that I've ever done personally. But it's touched me, definitely.
There was a couple that you mentioned up at the IDE, reuniting a young couple with a wedding dress for one, but a lady that just basically wanted a picture off of her fridge. Yeah,
so we got to some flats and people are very proud. They'll never tell you. We got a letter saying, we asked everyone, what did he want? And this woman said on hers, it was, she wanted a letter off the fridge. That's all she wanted. And I was, you know, we was like, if that's what you want, that's what you want. Do you not want anything else? No, that's all we want, letter off the fridge. And when we got to the flat, you've got a bed on the floor. No, just a mattress on the floor. That is it. A fridge, washing machine and a dryer. And there was no wardrobes, no kid stuff, no nothing. And the letter was off the kid, just saying happy birthday to happy birthday, mum. That was her present, and that's all she wanted. And you know, when you see things like, you don't realise how little some people have got. And until, you know, from the outside in, it looks like a nice apartment block. Everyone looks really nice, but really, when you look into people's lives, they didn't have anything, literally anything, and that's all she wanted. That one letter. You know, for me,
I will get back to the more technical nature of this, but how do you and your team prepare for that kind of thing? Because I mean, I know you do this kind of thing quite a lot, but most demolition takes place long after people have moved on.
Yep.
You know, you're dealing with an empty building. All of a sudden, you're face to face with basically grief and loss. How do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis?
It's a good question. That I think in demolition we're a different breed. I honestly do think we're a different breed. Some of the lads have been with me since day one, and you know, we've done this numerous times, and I think you just switch off to it. You know, it's a job, you have to do it, and unfortunately, when you're in a better position, you might not be in a better position personally, like to other people, but to someone like that, it honestly is. It makes you realise that you've got a lot more than what you think.
I think as well, Mark, is what we did do as a team throughout is we actually spoke a lot to each other. We spent a lot of time in the cabins, and the setup on site was good, and we actually spoke through about what was coming out. And and probably we you know, the lads did take a lot of it in, and they did understand, you know, what having nothing meant to them, and we discussed it quite a few times on site. And I'm not saying Mark says, you know, we're used to it. I think, you know, we're a lot more used to now in the terms of mental health and loss and what it is, and I think we're a lot more to show emotions now. And I'm not going to lie, is that, you know, it was an harrowing event, and you know, I've fortunately put the plan in place of where the material is going to get loaded down, and then I brought the residents in, and then, you know, to see them walking away with a shopping basket full of material, and, you know, with the paperwork and the certificates, and, you know, there was a Polish family and they had all the certificates, and he needed that to work, and some other passports, and yes, we did find the wedding dress, and we did get the wedding dress out for someone, and they did get married 2 weeks later with the wedding dress out of there. So it was harrowing, and, you know, I don't think we were ever blasé by it, or we ever put to one side, but we did have some quite deep chats inside the site canteen. I mean, a lot of laughter, a lot of sadness.
Yeah, what else as well, Mike, there is when you're actually giving stuff to the residents, and the faces just light up. You know, when you've got nothing, and you expect nothing, and you receive items back. I think that for the lads as well was a good moment, because you're giving them back stuff, and, you know, some of the people, the messages come through the WhatsApp. It was unbelievable. That, you know, they was thanking us. They were sending bottles of beer for the lads for the weekend. There was cards. There was all sorts. They went from obviously hating us because we're the ones destroying their homes to absolutely loving us. And, you know, that, I think that was the best part for the lads. I think that to deal with it as well, you've seen a lot of anger and a lot of frustration because they can't get in there, to happiness, to joy. You know, people getting pictures of the family, people getting safes back with the family heirlooms, and, you know, things like that. So that, I think that was a way of dealing with it as well. That there was a happy side to it.
I think Mark is one of the things that Mark did so well on site was sometimes we as an industry dispel things and move on and not prepared to talk and not be open. Whereas from day one, you know, Mark said, I will try and get you whatever I can. We'll try and do it. We built a plan, and the plan was made more difficult for us to plan it because we had to get the materials out. But we said open, look, talk to us, tell us what you want. We'll try and help you. Not that, you know, we're not going to talk to you, we're just going to demolish it, which we could have done. And we could have just said, well, it's dangerous, we're going to get it down, you know, you're not getting anything, go away. Which Mark and his team systematically, flat by flat, number by number, WhatsApp by WhatsApp, hour by hour, we had 6 slots. We come in and we got everything out. And the one for me was Mark. I know Mark got emotional with the record, with the fridge, but somebody wanted the record. So an old lady wanted the record, had it for years and years, and we managed to save a box of records for her. And to see the lads, you know, we had 60 Christmases on that job because we rescued 60 people's lots of flats and memories back in. And the children's toys were harrowing, but for me, it was seeing somebody get a stack of records and was delighted that they could take the records back and been with them for years. So it was a harrowing place, and it added Mark 2 weeks onto the program, but we just did it. We got it through, and it in the end, the hatred and the anger and the trying to duck and dive it around Dagenham, you know, we could speak to people, and people would come back and say, you know, if you found anything else, I might have this. It worked really well. And you can see the Mark there. You can see some of the things were starting to recover from in there was toys, and then what we've done is, you know, we had the builders merchants over the road, and I think we bought all of their 1-ton bags at one stage, Mark, to get
We were probably their best customer over a few months.
I think they sold out of 1 ton bags. So we managed to get all them in. And look, we were giving them lifts, so we were driving them around, so, you know, we were assisting them in just getting the stuff away the best.
The hardest thing there is when you've got an insurance company who they don't see residents, they don't see their asset is the building, and they see a monetary side of it. So we had to sit down and say, listen, you know, you've got 60 residents here. We need to spend the extra time, which is going to cost a little bit more money. And for me, I wouldn't have liked to take the job on, not dealing with people's property. It wouldn't have sat right with me. So we pushed and pushed and said, listen, this is the way, if you want us to do it, this is the way it's going to be. And this is how we're going to do it. And it's going to put a few more weeks on to the project, but you know, this is how it's going to be. And they came round to it. At first, it was obviously it's numbers. That's what a lot of things come down to in the world. You know, they don't see the tenants, they don't see the tenants' property, because that isn't, unfortunately, that their problem. Their asset is the building, and that's what was insured.
So a bit there is what we can see there, Mark, is, you know, what we had is we'd had a 52 metre high reach on. Then what we've done is we've reduced it down, we brought the arm down, we got the top 2 floors off there. And what we were doing there is once we'd opened up the building in the flats and removed the flats with the selector grab from in there, then we went back and we demolished it on a section by section. So traditionally, as I've talked to you before, you know, where's our strength point in a building? You know, the two stair cores, any lift shafts, anything for there. On a nice building, we had 2 opposite stair core strengths. So normally we would work to the stair core, but on this occasion, to get side on, where that photograph shows, we took 1 stair core down first, and then we went side on from in there to ensure, and Andrews had come up with the calculations to ensure that the building would stay intact as we moved across the best it could, ultimately bringing it down and failing it. But we can see it from there, get on the side, move it, turn around, and that was a great piece of kit that we had on there. So we got the calculations right, and then we did it on a flat by flat basis, going from right to left, as you can see there. So we got back to the other stair core and then brought it down from there. So the demolition process, once it gets started, we started to work really well from in there. I'll go to the next one, Mark. Maybe. Yeah. And again, Mark, if you want to talk through where we were, that one, that's where we're back there. You can see the flats open.
Yeah. So we kept this shows the picture, the pavement and the road, obviously still shut. We had a dust boss sat in the road spraying, because that was another. When you want it to rain, it doesn't rain, but as you can see the sky there, it was just, and this was during winter as well. It was unbelievable. You know, the weather down there. Obviously, we're a north base company that work all over the country, but when you go down south, it's different. It's a different climate, and it was literally the nicest weather I've ever seen. I mean, it helped it getting all people's property back, but obviously from us, we needed the water and keep the dust down, which was another factor in things with like the HSE, councils, businesses, residents. So as we're going through the building, we popped the basement, filled the basement in with the hardcore, and tracked along and dealt with each individual flat. So we've gone from 1 stair core on the back of the where the back of the machine was, and we're going through to the next stair core at the end of the building.
And if you can see, Mark, as well, just to kick in before, what we also did is we had 5 dust, noise and vibration monitors around the site, and we also had individual asbestos pumps running throughout the one to make sure that if there was any rogue asbestos in the building, that was monitored, and we didn't find anything from there. We got no readings back off the pumps from there. We got really low levels of dust, didn't go towards the residents from in there, and believe it or not, our noise levels were really low from in there, because we did do it systematically, flat by flat. section by section, bay by bay. It was really nice and controlled from in there. So the noise, the dust, the vibration, any effect there that HSE wanted to know what our readings were. We didn't exceed any readings. We found no fibre release from asbestos from there. There was some asbestos in the basement, a small area, which was done once the building was brought down. No road electrical feeds in. The gas had been disconnected and terminated. So we'd had that controlled in place, and so hence why it was quite a controlled and steady demolition process going forward. And again, some of the items there's in the first video, you actually see that this young lady being distraught. That's it. A wedding dress was in there, so she got the wedding dress, she got it cleaned, jewellery, passports, monies, safes. As Mark said before, you know that there was 400 Rolexes in there. No, there wasn't. They were good, to be fair. Everyone was open and honest with us. Sofas, clothes and toys, we got a lot of that from in there. So we managed to retrieve enough. I mean, I would say that we were really surprised at how much stuff we actually got back in the end. Obviously, some of the flats that were in the seat of the fire, yeah, they didn't get anything back. But on the other flats, we got an awful lot of stuff back for them. I don't know if you want me to talk on this one, Mark. Again, we had Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister, on site. At first, HSC Weekly, never known the level of interest from the HSC on this one, but we got it through. We produced paperwork and document for them. And then at the end, it went to sort of weekly, fortnight at the end. We produced a different method and sequencing halfway through to change to make sure we got the residents' materials out. Full closure, which kept us at full exclusion zone. We also had 24/7 security. We were up to 12 security operatives 24/7. At some time, we had 4 dogs on site for backup. We had the police liaison team through in there. We had the fire liaison there. Mark talked about retrieving material for the residents. We also retrieved large panels for the fire investigation. We received sections for them there. We removed a number of areas that we brought down and put to one side. Then we moved with the fire brigade. We managed to retrieve, I think there was about 150 hoses and about £20,000 worth of fire appliance material that the fire brigade had left on site once the fire was in there. So that was good for everyone to get that back. Local Dagenham fire sub-office was very, very close. So that was quite a major fire outlet. So that was good to get them all back from in there. And all of a sudden, we managed to deal with a lot of people in a very short period of time to get this down. Again, completed early January from the fire. Mark's very modest, received numerous commendations from the fire, local police, and the local residents. The WhatsApp group was, to be involved in the WhatsApp group, Mark will say, was quite humbling as a contractor and as a consultant to go through it. All of a sudden then we could start to think about reducing the exclusion zone, and so we could get traffic back in. Obviously, you know, disaster planning is what we talk about, is always to try and, you know, allay the fears, get it back to normal again. Exclusion zone reduced in end of November, then again into December, and then we got the road open where we could then deal with the final remnants of the site from there. Doctor's surgery was closed, had to reopen the doctor's surgery. Kids' nursery had to move to another location from in there, and then obviously 60 residents had to go to somewhere else from in there, and then hopefully with the current owners are talking about rebuilding it, which will be great because people will be able to go back in. So that was a sort of difficulty at the end of the statement that we had to do to sign off.
I think the only negative that I've got, and which when looking back now, and I said it in one of the meetings, so you have obviously the MPs involved, and there's a lot of political involvement in this job, and I thought they used it a bit as like a public public show. They turned up, cars, you know, the press, taking pictures that they've been there. My only concern there, and I said it, is the disturbance it causes. It heightens the job up again. So I kept saying to the police and the fire and the MPs, listen, let's just leave it where it is for now, because you're going to heighten it again when it doesn't need to be heightened. Let's just leave it where it is, end of the job, then we can get you involved. But they wanted to come quite often, and for me, I thought they were using it as a bit of a tool when they shouldn't do.
Yeah, I think, and to understand it, you know, that we are talking post-Grenfell, we are talking about a major fire. I mean, everyone jumped to the conclusion that it was a cladding fire, when in reality it wasn't. The cladding did go on fire, but only post after that one. A lot of residents being dislodged. You know, quite a really sort of a poor, deprived area where social housing's, you know, potentially lives at risk. So went through all the alarm systems, all through the fire systems from in there. So it was we were getting quite a lot of pressure. And, you know, we had the chief of police, we had the head of the fire brigade, which, you know, was ready to come out there. We had the deputy fire officer coming out. Very, very senior people from the HSC, you know, not quite telling us who was involved and who they were getting pressure from, but they were putting us under pressure to make sure everything was in doing, and they were checking the RAMs, they were checking the method statements again and again, and getting structural calculations checked, and then we had to go and get the structural calculations third-party checked, we had to get CAP3 checks. All these things were adding a little bit of pressure to us in the end. In reality, it would have let us crack on and get it done. We would have done what we needed to do, but we were under quite a lot of pressure from external bodies. So next one, Mark, sorry. And again, final little bit there. I think on this one, collaboration was key to it. Mark and his team did an amazing job from in there. We produced the paperwork and helped them and assisted them where we could, but, you know, we were in the background doing the paperwork, and Mark and his team was front facing. Handed over the site 2025. There was no accidents, no injuries, no reported incidents. Challenging project, one that, you know, it was a nice project for us as a consultant, but one I got an immense bit of pride from. Obviously, Mark's team did 99% of the time. We gathered very small input from there. It was an amazing project, and to see the residents get something back from there when they thought they were getting nothing was good. And I'm a big fan of this.
And I think that's more down to my team than me. You know, I won't take any credit at all, because for me I was just meeting after meeting after meeting, discussion after discussion. It was the lads on site that were doing the work, and for me, without them, the job wouldn't get done. And I honestly think I've got a really, really good team. And like I said, for me, it was them that doing the work, not me. So I can't really take much credit for it anyway.
I think your lads having a cheery demeanour, being open and friendly, talking to everyone really, really helped from in there. And I think that was the big key factors. And if I can take, as me and Mark have had some post ones on this one, if I can take anything from this one, from a fire damage project, is talk to people. Don't exclude them. Don't tell them not to do. Don't try and bluff them or bullshit them or do whatever. Just talk to people. Tell them what we're going to do. Give people bad news if we have to.
Being open and honest, and I said that from the first meeting. I'll always be open and honest. If I can't get something, I'm going to tell you I can't get something. I'd rather tell them the bad news than string them along for 6-7 weeks on a job and then give them bad news. You know, it's giving someone false promises that really they've lost everything. And whether you do, you know, we do house demolitions where they've burnt down the house, and it's the same with that. You know, listen, let me do what we do to try and get you what we can for you, but I can't promise anything. And that for me is what I've learned going forward on all these fire jobs is you can do what you want, but you don't know what you're dealing with really on a job like this. Whether it's a house, whether it's a commercial building, whether it's a flat, until you start demolishing that building, you do not know what you're dealing with. So your methods changing every day, your risks changing every day, your exclusion zone can change. Just the discussions with your operatives on site. Your machine driver is the one driving the machine. I'm not going to go up to the machine driver and tell him how to do his job. You've got experienced lads that understand the work, all talking to each other to do a project that is very difficult to do. Whether it's just a house, whether it's a commercial building. On the back of that, if you can get people's gear out, great. But last thing I want to do is promise someone something or under deliver something. You want to be straight from the start, open and honest, and I think that works really well.
I think again, something we both take out of this is the demolition elements of the building and the side of it. Again, not to spell it, we've got some probably as experienced demolition people listening and watching. It was relatively straightforward. We had a nice big exclusion zone in the end. We removed the scaffolding, quite straightforward. It's all the peripheral stuff that comes with a fire damage one, interaction with everyone else. That was the key to this project. And Mark set a benchmark very early on. I set a benchmark a little bit with the police and the emergency services and the HSC that we're not going to be, not say bullied into doing things, but we're not going to let people wander around that building when Mark was PC and I was principal designer. We're not going to let people do their own investigations. We're not going to let the insurance company walk in and go wherever they want. It's going to be controlled and calculated. We had one certain day where we had a young lady from the fire brigade that was very, very dogmatic and really wanted to go on there, and the guy from USO and the search and rescue team who I've known from another project, we had to pull her back a little bit because they wanted to go on fire damaged areas which was not safe to go on. So pulling people back a little bit and saying, look, let's just take a step back here before something worse happens was one of the key factors. So again, not promising nothing, be open and honest, and I think it worked well from in there. But Mark's lads were sensational with the residents.
Well, I know Mark is being incredibly modest, but loads and loads of people saying some very positive things. I'm just going to go through a few bits in the chat. Dan Mead says, impressive stuff. Thanks for sharing. Chris Ford arrived late, but he said he's going to watch it later. Let me go back to the ones that I've starred. Couple of questions. Gary asked, can you still recycle a lot of this demolition material after a fire, or is it too contaminated?
Good question, that. So the local tip wouldn't take the material because of obviously the ash. There was a lot of ash in especially the top two floors. So we had to go to, we had to send someone from the tip to the job to inspect the material for where it was going. And obviously everyone wanted to know where it was going. The HSC, at one point the residents wanted to know where it was going because they wanted all the gear back. That's, so it had to go to specialist tips.
Yeah. And one of the big things, Mark, was the asbestos. People initially think about the contents of asbestos. So, as I say, we couldn't go in and do an R&D survey because of fire damage. We couldn't get in. So what we've done is we tested materials as they come out sporadically. Yes, as we did, we've done some pump tests. We tested materials as we went along, and we were fairly confident and comfortable that none of the materials contained asbestos. But as Mark said, it went to a specialist tip as well. That I agree with 100%. It was very, very good. Very, very good. We've worked with this guy before, he was good.
Let's have a look at this. Dan Cullen sharing the same thing. Just still rattling through.
Yeah, so I mean the Irish driver was unbelievable. I mean he's many years in, and obviously he was from PP O'Connor's, who hired the machine off because it was a 52-meter specialist machine. So yeah, very good. Definitely have him back. I know that.
Very calm, which you need in that situation.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was, when we were getting a little bit interrogated by the HSC, when we went through a meeting with our structural engineers, HSC, their structural engineers, their team, there was probably, I think, 12 of us in the cabin, and he was understanding, and he actually helped. He sat down with me, and we wrote the method statement together. So it's not something I put together from in there. I mean, it's many years since I've driven high reaches poorly, but he decided with the structural engineer and ourselves how we wanted to do it, which way we wanted to do it. No good me writing the method statement for someone else. He told me what he wanted. He told me what he wanted. And we simplified the method statements, and we got the method statement, the key method statement, down to about 4 pages. And we said to the HSC, we're not going to overcomplicate it. We're going to give you 2, 3, maybe 4 pages of text and drawings. And we said, look, okay, that's fine. And then we explained to them what we did. We understood it. We signed it off before we started, but we got the high reach operator to help us write the method statement. He told us where he was going to sit. He told us where he wanted to go up to it. And then we wrote the method statement with Andams, and then we broke it with ourselves from in there. So as we all know, a terrible loss from Brandon's Angus, but Angus was fundamentally key part to getting the understanding how the building would react in the demolition. Wrote us some great, assisted some RAMs from there, got us some great structural ones. Although we couldn't go in the building, we did it through drones. So, you know, a terrible loss to the industry, but we have to be thankful for Angus and Andams for putting their input into it from in there. And when we wrote the method statements, but we got the key guides to write the method statements. And again, a very, very short, precise methodology of how we're going to do the demolition, not 50 files worth or 50 pages, 4 pages, A4 pages of how we're going to do it on a day-to-day basis from that way.
I've got two comments that I do want to share in a moment. But one thing that struck me in all of this, I mean, obviously we talk a lot about competence in the demolition industry. To do a job like this in every aspect requires enormous competence, and it's no coincidence, I don't think, that all of that competence came from IDE members. That is where the core competence of this industry lies now, isn't it?
For me, I've been in it a lot less than Mike, but for me, you learn not just a lot, but you feed off people. When you're in a room with individuals who have experience, knowledge, skills, and even just talking to someone, you pick up things. You go to seminars, you speak to a different person, you have a conversation, and you pick up things. So for me, it's the IDE is fantastic. And when we talk about machine drivers, I honestly think machine drivers need to be pushed into the IDE as well, because they're the ones. Like I said before, I'd never go up to a machine driver and tell him how to do things. You have that conversation with them, and more often than not, your machine drivers are the ones doing the job. They're the ones understanding the building. How, if you pull that wall, what else is going to happen? They understand that straight away. And for me, that needs to be pushed as well. That's one for Adrian, that to try and push your machine drivers into the ID. But honestly, the ID for me, Michael discuss it more detail. But for me, it's been, an eye opener in the industry. It elevates you to that next level. When you sat in a meeting, you tell your fire, your police, all these people that you're a demolition engineer. You've got the skilled knowledge, experience to undertake the job because of what you do, and you've proven how you've done other work via your exams. When you go into detail of what you had to do to get that membership, then you understand.
Yeah, I think I was going to touch on that, and Adrian's just come back with that bit. Mark's right. I'm on the committee of the Institute of Demolition Engineers. Huge exponents of the Institute of Demolition Engineers. probably Mark talks back a little bit from in there, is that having Mark being a member of the Institute, when he goes and says he talks to the machine driver, he's not going to go up to the machine driver and say, you do what, but because he's got that skills, knowledge and experience to have understood, to have written method statements, to have done an exam, to have been interviewed by his peers, to understand the and Mark, has been on the stage today, he clearly understands demolition from in there. Then we can put it through. The bit where Adrian talked about the tech idea was designed for those machine drivers, and myself and Adrian's been a leading thing for the Institute, is we want those machine drivers, we want those supervisors, we want those people at the face who are doing engineering with demolition. We want them to be part of the industry. We want to drive them forward. They're the key backstone of our industry. We need them in place. But in terms of demolition engineers, myself, Mark, Angus sat in a room with the HSC. HSC clearly knew me because I'd done lots of the HSC. They knew Mark, they knew Angus. As to our competency, we were all demolition engineers. How can we sign off a method statement? Because we're all members of the Institute of Demolition. So we can sign them off. We can put our name to that document to say we are members. If you look on the new HSC website, anyone goes on the HSC website now, there is now a section in the HSC that talks about competence being measured as a demolition engineer or a member of an organisation similar to the Institute of Demolition Engineers or part of the IDE. So all of a sudden now, we've now got real gravitas, as when we sit into a meeting and they ask us our qualifications, we can say proudly that we are demolition engineers, but we also want our operatives and our senior supervisors to come in at that tech level to also be proud to say, yes, I'm a tech IDE member, I've gone through the qualifications, I've done through the system, I'm qualified to assist on taking this demolition down. And that's what we want to bring forward, because Mark and myself, we asked the machine driver, how are you going to do it? I mean, we knew roughly what he was going to say, but he come up with the right ideas. He tells us where he's going to sit. And also, what Mark fails to remember is that he had a really, really experienced supervisor on site. We haven't talked about Dom and his supervisor on site and his team on there, but they really organised that site, and there should be the next level of members to come into the industry as the tech ID levels. Those supervisors, those managers, those people who are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis should be in there. And we should be bringing the Institute, whether it be engineers or the machine drivers, really experienced operatives, or the supervisors in to bolster our industry, and also to give us the knowledge that we as engineers need while they're working out on site. So the Institute of Demolition Engineers, as you can tell, really passionate about it, but we should be bringing all those people forward to take us to the next level to the industry. And I think Adrian, thankfully, is doing that.
Just a very quick point on that. I mean, you've mentioned the fact that this is sort of an outreach thing, to be able to reassure the HSE or the fire service that you're an IDE member. But there must be some reassurance internally as well. For you, Mark, to be able to call on Michael know his stuff because he's an IDE member. Alistair will know his stuff. He's an IDE member. It's almost like just assembling the A-team, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the contacts you get through the IDE as well is second to none. I know I can speak to Mike, to Adrian, to anyone in the IDE and understand you're talking to someone who's been proven that they know what they're talking about. And likewise, when you're sat in a meeting, and when you're sat in a meeting with people, and it's very intimidating, no matter who you are, when you're sat in there with MPs, with HSE, with chief of fire, and the police, the council, when you're sat in the meeting with all these and you're looking around and you're like, how do you prove what you know? And unfortunately nowadays it's an IDE membership. You've gone through that rigorous stages of doing your exams, doing your meetings, and you're quite comfortable in discussing a job. Plus, obviously, the fact that you've done other jobs previously that are like this, that it gives comfortability, I think, to these people that we know that they know what they're talking about and they can deal with this project.
I think one of the things that surprises me a little bit with our industry, Mark, and and where I tend to go to all the ID events when I possibly can, is you've got effectively 8 people lecturing to you, not lecturing, showing you a seminar, but they're opening up the secrets, aren't they? They're giving you Pandora's box for the day. They're showing you, look, this is how I did this project. This is what I did. This is how I done. And every time I go to an ID event, I come back with knowledge. I've been at it 42 years. My father's still alive at 93. Started in 1947. My grandfather in 1912. As a family, I've got another son in the industry. I don't know it all. You learn every single day on this game.
And I think there's that many people with different specialities.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a different speciality. And like for me, I don't know how, but I just seem to deal with fire damaged buildings more than most people, or, you know, people deal with them as well. It's just part of demolition. But, you know, I can speak to someone about, you know, if someone's got a job who's never done a fire damaged building before, they can ring me up and say, how would you do this? It's just a communication type thing. But in the IDE, you know, if I give a lecture on a fire damage building, you know, they understand, you get an idea. Same with someone who does bridges. I don't do bridges, but you're looking at that. It's interesting. You're taking in how they're doing it, what machines they're using, what attachments they're using, you know, what the process involved, and you're just gaining knowledge that way. Every single time, every single, you know, project, you're gaining knowledge. And for me, that's you can't buy that.
I do want to share this one. This is Ryan Noon. Evening, Ryan. I haven't seen you for ages, mate. But he says, interesting stuff, gents. The complexity of a fire damage structure is often overlooked. Top work, he says. Obviously, Ryan and the Howard Stock team were involved in that demolition of that fire damage car park not so long ago. So thank you very much indeed for that. I've no idea when Mike has gone, and he's going to miss out on some of the comments here. But I originally scheduled this for an hour. Obviously, we've been going for an hour and a half, and I do want to draw a line in the sand because I can smell my dinner. But a couple of things that I do want to share. I had this one from Dan Cullen, who says, amazing work to all that was involved. Well done. And my personal favourite, which is kind of echoing what I thought on this. Total respect to you and your company for the caring attitude to this very sensitive project. Well done, sir. Well done indeed. Yeah, that, as I say, I thoroughly enjoyed my time up at the Royal Armouries, but the one that stuck, the one that really did sort of play on my mind on my journey back home was yours, Mark, and for all the right reasons. You know, I think there is this perception that demolition is all wham bam, thank you, man, which, you know, often is exactly what's required. But when sensitivity and delicacy is required, it is possible. You know, the industry can step up.
Yeah, I think it's for me. You see different, especially doing these type of work. You know, normally everyone's gone. You're dealing with a building. It's either been trashed or it's not been lived in for a long time. With these type of jobs, you're dealing with real situations. You know, people have got nothing, and you don't realise what people have until you literally see it firsthand. And when for me, I was doing the presentation, I'm looking down and everyone's got a tear in their eye. It set me off. I know that because I'm talking about it, and you know, like I said, for me, it's I've gone through it, lived through it, and I'm just discussing it. But when I look down and people was getting teary about it, for me, it struck a chord with me anyway. And like I say, I'll never forget the job. And for my lads as well, I don't think they'll ever forget the job because you're dealing with that many different flats, that many different people, personalities. Like I said, first, they all hated us, but at the end of the job, they loved all the lads. They, like, honestly, without the lads doing what they did, you know, for me, the tenants wouldn't have got back half the gear. And I can honestly say that I did nothing. I just sat in meetings. It was the lads that actually physically did the work, got the rings, got the dresses, got the pictures. You know, it's credit to them more than me.
Very quickly, Dan Cullen says, thank you for a very informative evening. Well done, guys, and thank you. But the one that I wanted to throw back up was this one. Howard Stock, this is Ryan Noon again. The IDE stance on shared learning is very impressive. Like-minded professionals sharing knowledge that is often has a commercial edge and would often not be shared. Keep it up, fellas. Cheers, Mark, he says. I think that's a pretty good note to end on.
absolutely.
I'm not here to advertise the IDE by any means, but it does feel to me like the IDE kind of feels like it's got a bit of a thing about it now, doesn't it?
I think it elevates you. That's
I think it elevates you, but I think the IDE itself over the past few months has been elevated itself. It just kind of feels like it's time. Maybe it's because I'm a fan of Adrian McLean. I don't know, but it does feel like it's of its age, you know.
I think where we're at now is I think we're at a time where it's encouraging. People are encouraged to join the IDE. The Tech IDE grade is a great grade to come in. Someone who's a machine driver, a supervisor, can be rewarded for working on site. The HSE are now encouraging the IDE. So that's a great footage. So all of a sudden now this IDE badge, and it's remember, Mark, it's an individual badge. It's not a corporate badge. You don't work for ABC Demolition. You work, the name on the certificate is your name, not your company name. You can take this badge with you wherever you go in the world and it's recognised. So we're recognised worldwide. We're the only really recognised institute of demolition engineers in the world. So we are the forefront of that. So we've got that badge. We now want to encourage people to join it. And as you know, Howard Stott said before, we're not here for commerciality. You know, we're not getting paid to do this. No one gets paid to do the lectures of the.
Are we not?
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately not. So what we're looking to try and do is encourage ones, give out the information. So anyone who's stuck on a job, although think back and think, oh yeah, I remember going to an IDE event once, space deck roof, they collapse. You know, what special precautions are we going to do? I've seen a fire damage one. How do we deal with the fire damage? I've seen this had the scaffolding react. These are the things that we're trying to encourage. And I don't know about yourself, but the last few seminars at Leeds and at London, they've started to really kick in with really good lectures, really good, interesting lectures to do. And there's a buzz. There's a buzz about the IDE. There's a real movement forward. And please, anyone watching who wants to join, you know, speak to myself, speak to Mark, speak to Adrian. You know, even if you don't think you're at the level, you know, talk to us. We'll get you through one way or the other. You know, we want you to be part of it. If you're a demolition individual working in the industry, we want you to become part of the institute.
I had this from Gary. When's the next car park collapse show, Mike?
Well,
we've done it twice. I think it's probably enough. Isn't it?
I think we've done it twice, and one of the ones that we're looking to do, maybe a little bit one is I've got a couple of really interesting. As Mark says, his specialism is the insurance one. I do a lot of car parks and concerts. I've got some really interesting structural car parks, structural concrete frame buildings. I've got some bridges coming down over the next couple of weeks, so maybe we can put one of them in again. If Mark's crazy enough to have us back on again, I can certainly do something to do with car parks or structures again. Or if there's any other topic anybody wants, let us know. I'll either get an IDE member to do it, or I'll do it myself.
Just on that subject, that you know, Mike, the door is always open. You know, we love to share this sort of stuff. Let's have a look. Where are we? Gary Muirhead says, "Thank you guys for a very interesting, informative evening. Loved it this evening. Hats off to everyone involved. Indeed." Dan Cullen fancies an individual operator badge. That's a Tech IDE badge. Dan, I will drop your line afterwards. Tell you exactly how you go about that.
Yeah, or if you get into contact with myself, I'm more than happy to help.
Fantastic stuff. Guys, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure, as I expected it to be. No great surprise. Very informative. Very, very informative. Congratulations. But congratulations to both of you, and obviously to the guys at Andon as well. But specifically, Mark, honestly, I just... You kind of had me on the verge of tears a couple of weeks ago, and now I've actually had a chance to think about it properly. Job. And hey, listen, the governor's here as well. He says, "Thanks, all great presentation," says Mr.
No, thank you very much.
El Presidente. We're doing a bridge demolition soon at Econ Group. Well, take lots of photographs, do us a presentation.
Well, why
As I say,
don't you come and do a presentation for us?
yeah, absolutely. Dan, it's about time we turn the cameras on you. Yeah, why not? Let's get you to do a presentation.
We'll do it. Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Guys, I'm going to let you get back to your, I'm going to say get back to your day job, but get back to your evenings. Really appreciate you being here. Yeah, let's keep in touch. And if you've got anything else you'd like to say at any point in the future, just give me a bell because, you know, I don't have a social life. I just sit here twiddling my thumbs until I have to do another live show. So whatever you want to say, the door's always open.
No, thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
And there we are. We are all done, everybody. I was expecting 60 minutes. It's been 95. I think that's more than enough for anyone. So everybody, go and have a fantastic evening. I will be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock as per usual. Don't forget, there is another event. This is nothing to do with me whatsoever, but you've seen the quality of presentation that IDE type folks can produce. I have already put the link in the chat. I think I can probably do it again. Yeah, that's tomorrow night. I'm not entirely sure what time it is, but there is another event going on tomorrow night talking about inner city demolition. I know it's a project that Mike Kehoe was involved in, but it's a John F. Hunt representative that is going to do the talk. If you fancy a bit more of that without having to look at me and my weird hat, you can do that. You can just pop along and take part. Until then, everybody, have a fantastic evening, and I'll see you all very, very soon. And we're out of here.